Thank you all for coming to our Theoretically Speaking seminar series, which highlights exciting advances in theoretical computer science and related fields for a broad general audience. And I'm Shafi Goldwasser. I'm the director of the Simons Institute for Theory of Computing, which was established in 2012 through a gift from the Simons Foundation. And we are located on Berkeley campus at Calvin Hall, and dedicated to collaborative research where we gather world experts from all over the world to work on specific topics in collaboration, mostly theoretical computer science and people, again, in the sciences, in engineering, and when I say sciences, I mean very broadly defined, in social sciences, economics, philosophy, as well as the life science and exact sciences. And our speaker tonight, which is the main event, is Helen Nissenbaum, who is a professor of information science at Cornell Tech. She previously served as the associate director of the Center for Human Values at Princeton University. So Helen really is a great example for what we're trying to do in the Simons Institute, to bring guests and that will come and work in the Institute, not just in theoretical computer science proper, but also people who can contribute to the field from other disciplines. And Helen holds a PhD in philosophy from Stanford University, and a BA from the University of Wits. Am I saying it correctly? And what else? Her work spans societal, ethical, political dimensions of information technology and digital media. Her books, she's published several books, include Obfuscation, a user's guide for privacy and protest, Values at Play in Digital Games, and Privacy in Context, Technology Policy, and Integrity of Social Life. And she's contributed to privacy-enhancing software, including Track Me Not and AdNauseam, which I think is part of the topic of the lecture today. And both are free and available online. So please join me in welcoming Helen.
Before I start my presentation, this talk, I do want to say thank you so much to Shafi, to the Simons Institute, to the Privacy Program for including me in the program this semester. I had a sabbatical, half sabbatical coming up, and I wanted a place where I could, get on and do a lot of work. And I also was interested in stimulation and learning, and the Simons Institute just provides the best of both, as well as just very comfortable setting. So thank you so much. And I'm delighted to have the opportunity to talk about this work, AdNauseam and data obfuscation. Some of you may know, maybe some of you have already heard me talking about obfuscation. It's something that I've been working on for many years. And I care a lot about it. And it remains an ongoing, you could say, passion, maybe even an obsession. Some of you will probably realize. And I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to speak. I hope there will be some time for discussion. And I'm always open to critique, suggestions, and most of all, people who will join this particular, let's call it a struggle. Now, before I start with the substance, there are people who I want to mention and have you look at this slide for a few minutes, because I could not have done almost all, maybe all of what I'm going to be talking about tonight if it weren't for these people. And you'll see I'll be mentioning them as we go along, but they are a critical part of what we've been trying to do with data obfuscation. And the many others, I should say, are not only colleagues who have worked on obfuscation and with us on obfuscation, but with the various products that I'm going to be describing to you, just contributed by sending us messages and correcting the code and finding bugs and so forth. So if you only have a minute and you're going to leave the room after this slide, this is and otherwise known as an outline of the talk that I'm about to give. This is what I want to achieve during this talk. First of all, to explain what we mean by data obfuscation, to show and admit that it is a disruptive approach to asserting privacy, to asserting privacy rights, and also expressing protest against some of what's going on today with surveillance. But it's also a very, very natural reaction. The second point is that it's a fragile approach, it's contingent, and it's circumstantial. It's very hard to come up with some grand scheme or grand theory of data obfuscation because how well it works is very contingent upon details of the circumstance, which I think, unfortunately, removes me a little bit outside of theory, which maybe demands something much more general. Nevertheless, I argue it should be guarded as a powerful chip in the grand bargain for fair and adequate privacy regulation. I hope, and it's my wish, that it should be scientifically studied, that it can be refined and developed, and I use the word savior, I know it's a little bit grand, in these increasing numbers of adversarial settings that we find ourselves in which data is being grabbed from us and used in ways that we don't even know about and not necessarily ways that serve our interests. And finally, that if there's anyone in the audience who wants to build systems that obfuscate, we need a lot more instances. So let me start, and this is back in 2005, 2006, with Track Me Not, which was the first effort of data obfuscation. And I was at that time, a few years before 2006, I was part of a large NSF grant, which involved mainly computer scientists, and I was, the representative ethicist in this large privacy grant. And I remember it was just about the time where AOL had released its anonymized search query set. And it was also roughly about the time that the Department of Justice was trying to generate regulation around children's privacy, COPPA. And they wanted to, so there was an effort by the DOJ to show that there was a lot of pornography online and that there was a lot of activity of people using search engines to find pornography. So they went to the various search companies and they said, show us the queries, show us the results of the queries. Some of the search engines complied, they partially complied. Some of you may recall that Google fought back and said that they weren't going to comply, and eventually they gave some attenuated set of search query terms. So that was the big thing going on. I think many people, perhaps some of the cryptographers and theoretical computer scientists here and elsewhere, were very excited by the fact that you could take a so-called anonymized data set, but even a New York Times journalist was able to take this anonymized AOL data set and then actually identify, and I won't go into the details of that, but actually the whole idea of anonymization and the difficulty of anonymizing data sets in this way is crucial to the privacy program and many people in the program. But that's, I was on this little detour. And when I heard about these things, and I remember we were at a retreat, I was complaining, I was saying, wow, you know what that tells me? That search companies are actually storing every search I make. And isn't that outrageous? I don't want them to have my search terms. And my computer science colleagues looked at me kind of pityingly. And they said, yeah, well, of course, the search terms are going to the, Google or AOL or God knows which search engines were available in those days. And of course, it's in the server. They have the search term. It's theirs. There's nothing you can do about it. And I was obstinate, and I thought, well, yeah, maybe there is nothing that I can do about it to remove the search terms. But what if I could mess with the search terms? And I spoke to a student who was Daniel Howe, who was a PhD student at NYU at the time. And we decided that even though we couldn't remove the search terms, what we could do is generate false search terms, and thus TrackMeNot was born. And we created an extension, a browser extension, which generated fake query terms. And we released the first version in 2006. We've been updating it ever since. And I should say update, improve. The noise that we generate is better. And looks like this. And you have some ability to personalize it to which searches you wanted to go to. It works with I could have chosen Baidu, but since I don't use Baidu, I hadn't selected it as one of my choices. You can have the query frequency and so forth. And by now we're pulling the terms from RSS feeds, and there were many complaints from people who wanted to have some control about the search terms. And so we allow people to choose what RSS feeds to choose from. So that happened. By now, 13 years later, the person who is maintaining this single-handedly is Vincent Tubiano, who's a technologist at this point with RCEP in Paris, and that's the equivalent of the U.S. Federal Communication, the FCC, the Federal Trade Commission. And there's a lot of ongoing work because the browsers are updated and so forth, and we have to deal with various side channel attacks, and this is ongoing work for Vincent, and your fingers crossed, he does this as a labor of love. But as we were working on TrackMeNot, it occurred to all of us and to myself that there's something one can generalize. Yeah.
How many people, do you know how many people use this?
We roughly estimate about 50,000 daily users. We don't keep close enough track, and you can download it from lots of different places. And so we have the numbers that Mozilla gives us, and maybe we know the Chrome users as well. But I asked Vincent this question, and that was his estimate. We realized that obfuscation is a technique. It's a technique. It's not just a one-off thing. And so we started thinking about what are the characteristics of obfuscation. Could we define obfuscation in a more general way? So here's one way to think about obfuscation. If you want to protect privacy, and you have many, of course, cryptographic techniques, you want to protect Waldo in a cryptographic way. There were a couple of students at NYU, and they'd created this little system with me called Cryptogram. Cryptogram would, as you see, blur photographs. Let's say you could use it for your Facebook album, but Facebook also used to blur your photos, except from the Facebook perspective, they could see your photos. And so we wanted some way for people to be able to blur their photographs on the Facebook server, and these two students had come up with Cryptogram. But if you want to obfuscate, if you want to achieve privacy through obfuscation, this is how you do it. So the definition that, and sometime within that period, I wrote a book with Finn Brunton, who is, he's now on the faculty at NYU in the Media, Culture, and Communications department. At the time that this work was happening, Finn was a postdoc with me, and he was an amazing resource because he knows so much. And when he heard about TrackMeNot, he kept on coming up and saying, oh, that reminds me of this, and that reminds me of that. So we wrote this book, and in it we defined obfuscation as production, inclusion, etc., of ambiguous or false data in an effort to evade, distract, confuse data gatherers, diminish the reliability and value of data aggregations. And one of Finn's one of the cases that he brought to my attention was the case of Second World War pilots that would fly over in order to drop bombs in Nazi-held territory. And they, of course, were concerned about being detected by Nazi radar. And they came up with this particular solution. They would be flying over towards the target, and the radar screen would show a phosphor dot on the screen, and all of a sudden, the whole screen is full of phosphor dots. And what the pilots were doing, and this was courtesy of a journalist in the Netherlands who found this photograph for us, was they were releasing what was known as radar chaff. And actually, Finn had seen examples of this radar chaff in a museum in Berlin, which was simply pieces of paper, black on the one side, aluminum on the other side. And as the planes were getting into range, they would release this radar chaff, phosphor dots, drop payload, and off they went. And by the time the screen cleared, they were out of range. So that was a fascinating use of obfuscation. And here's another one. Who knows what this movie is? Who said North by Northwest? Yes, good for you. So where is Cary Grant? Actually, I couldn't find him. Here's another one that when I was doing this research, I happened to be reading the New York Times Magazine. And how many people have aunties who do that? And this one. This one is an orb-weaving spider. And what it does is with little bits of leaf and bugs that it catches, it weaves webs around it into the shape of the orb-weaver spider itself, so that when predators are flying by, they at least increase the odds that the predator is going to go for one of these decoys. And in case you think the orb-weaving spider is something really exotic, only found in the tropics, here it is in New Jersey, and it's in my backyard. And I don't know if you can see it, but it's right over there. And my family can attest that I ran outside every few days taking pictures of this orb-weaving spider. And I'm going to give you a whole lot of other examples just so that you get a sense of it. Monroe, Washington, the date was, well, it was in 2008. Someone robs a bank. He's wearing a blue shirt, a yellow safety vest and safety glasses. And as after he robs the bank, he runs away. The police arrive, and suddenly there are dozens of men wearing blue shirts and yellow vests. And what he had done is he'd put an ad in Craigslist saying, there's a job here paying a very nice salary. Show up at this and this time, and you must be wearing such and such. And he got away. This is now more recent. An artist, actually, Heather Dewey Hagborg, and she's created, this is real, or this is for real. It's DNA spray that both erases your DNA, that's one of the sprays, and replaces, and what it has lots of other DNA that you can, if you don't want evidence of your presence, hopefully you're not going to use it to conceal a crime, but if, for instance, you don't want anybody to know you were there, you can use this. Benjamin Grosser has GoRando, which is it's kind of does random emojis on Facebook. And this is Fred Cohen, who in 2006, I just sort of bumped into this article. I don't know the quality of the technical work. I'd love, if anyone knows Fred Cohen or knows about this work, I would love to hear more about it. But it was just a beautiful article about the use of honeypots and decoys in computer and network security, and how, well, you can see what you want to do really is just change the statistical success rate by creating decoys and diversions for malicious attackers on a system. So you can see there's really a wide range of uses and formats for obfuscation. So the next project that I want to talk about then was AdNauseam. We were very happy with the way, what we learned from TrackMeNot. And as many of us, we're concerned about however you call it, surveillance capitalism, surveillance advertising, targeted behavioral advertising, the need in order to do that to track people as they do everything actually now, not only what you do online, but trying to match what you do online with what your purchases offline and so forth. So this was what we were concerned about. The advertising environment, and as many people are aware, and this is a picture that so many people will show, but it gets denser and denser each time people show this particular graphic, but it's highly complex real-time auctioning for ad space that depends on a whole lot of factors, including the person's profile, so it's targeted to the individual. And we, like many privacy advocates and activists, were and continue to be we find this activity highly problematic. And as a result, we wanted to create some kind of mechanism, some kind of response. And so we created AdNauseam. So here's a little introduction.
As data hoarding corporations keep sabotaging the constitution of the Do Not Track standard, and ad networks keep selling our profiles behind our backs, we are left with no choice but to fight back. From the studios that brought you TrackMeNot, the browser extension that keeps searching to obfuscate your search queries, comes yet another data obfuscation plugin, AdNauseam, clicking ads so you don't have to. The AdNauseam plugin works in concert with your favorite ad blocker. Every ad blocked is then silently clicked by AdNauseam, confusing your data trackers by virtually liking all ads. Within your browser, the AdNauseam add-on collects and visualizes your clickstream over time, giving you a small glimpse of the data you passively generate. AdNauseam works in the background and does not interfere with your browsing. Point your browser at this URL and install AdNauseam now. Spread the word and help us code as we work to make AdNauseam better and to bring it to more people and more browsers. Finally, to the ad industry, we would like to say it is time to be respectful of our privacy expectations. Let's work together towards an honest and meaningful Do Not Track standard. Until that day comes, be sure we will keep pushing your buttons. All of them.
Okay. So that's AdNauseam, and clicks all the ads on your screen. And this is how you can personalize it. You can hide the ads if you like, or in some of the time when I use AdNauseam, I don't hide the ads because I don't mind seeing ads. I just don't like the tracking that goes along with them. click ads. Sometimes malware is delivered through the trackers, and so we also block that. So there's a fair bit you can do. What's also very nice about AdNauseam is it creates an ad vault. So if you're not looking at the ads, and even if you are, it creates an aggregate of all the ads that have been shown to you, mainly the display ads, but then also just the kind of classified looking ads on your page. And it's actually a fascinating, because it gives you a little glimpse of how the web or how the ad network landscape is viewing you. And I saw that, I could tell from this that I enjoy watching thrillers. And I just didn't understand why I got so many shoe ads, because honestly, anyway, but it does reveal something about yourself. We have a GitHub. We welcome people to tell us about bugs and forking and so on. It's all open code, and obviously these, both TrackMe and AdNauseam are free and free to download. And Vitaly's question I had anticipated. Now this, you'll see there's a reason for these numbers. This only tells you the numbers of Firefox users, and in fact, from what we can tell, the majority of our users are actually Chrome users, but we don't have statistics on Chrome use. So AdNauseam caused, yes?
Is there also a provision for managing all the cookies that you're going to get?
I think you don't get cookies. Oh, you mean besides the ad cookies, various other? No, we don't. You don't. God, no, I don't think you get cookies. I think we block the cookies. Sorry, I didn't anticipate the question. I would have checked with the team. Yeah.
You know how many of these clicks are actually being registered as opposed to kind of classified as fraudulent and one?
We don't know. And
Because generating clicks on behalf of users would be like a great way to generate money, lots of companies which are trying to generate these fraudulent clicks.
yes, yes.
Something is being paid for, so as a result,
Yeah.
there are many technologies to detect
Right.
clicks which are not done by the
Right, and you know this was AdNauseam was much more controversial, let me just say from the outset, than TrackMe Not. And we had been worried about the click fraud accusation, and we didn't think, there was no money involved. We weren't generating money for ourselves, and we weren't purposely generating. I know, but we were at some point worried, could we be sued for click fraud? And that we haven't. Because we ourselves are not committing the click fraud. I mean, we're gonna talk a lot about this. This is good. So we had a lot of. We're not benefiting from the clicks. The trouble with words like fraud, it's so, the ethics of it is so baked in, and you'll see there's still going to be a big discussion of the ethics, and so I don't want to attach fraud to it unless we can come to the conclusion that it's fraudulent. So here are some of the reactions. These were the positive reaction. This one was from a friendly person who decided that he had an idea for how to extort money using AdNauseam, and we just kind of politely said, we love your enthusiasm, but no thank you. We want to stay on the right side of the law. And then there were many negative reactions, lots of criticism, and this was one of them, Pale Moon, which is a browser, I think it's an offshoot of a Firefox browser. Anyway, he banned us from his browser, and we had a very long correspondence. We each tried to explain our positions, and in the end, he gave us a very bad rating, and that was the end of our relationship. So that's the fun part of the talk. And now comes more of the analysis of AdNauseam and Track Me Not and generally of obfuscation. I went around and I talked about Track Me Not and AdNauseam, as one might about one's children, and I was so proud. And every place I went, of course, there were people who loved it, but there were people who were very critical, and many of those people said that it was unethical, and some people said, absolutely, it doesn't work, and have you verified, and so forth. And so I want to take you through both of these questions to show you where we are with both of those questions. And you'll see that it's a highly complex situation, and it's unfolding and continues to unfold. So there's a lot more in this with this question, but I wanted to end with the does it work question and get some help from all of you. So when we ask the question, is it ethical? We mean, and here David Lyon, the philosopher, ethicist, had coined this term court of conscience versus court of law. And we're talking about court of conscience because there's certain answers that can be given about what's legal and what isn't legal. And I'm not going to be talking about that directly. So as you can guess, some of the concerns that people raised about these were a lot in regards to Track Me Not, some of them about AdNauseam, or about many of the products that I showed you that weren't our two. They said, and in fact, this was actually the very first time I talked about Track Me Not in Bloomington, Indiana, and the first question that a woman raised her hand and said, this is terrible, you're lying, you're deceiving. And, you know, I was quite taken aback and have spent a lot of time thinking about that. Some people said it's you're free riding on peers and on the services. You're wasting bandwidth, server resources. You're polluting the data streams, and kind of generically you're causing harm. Now, before we go anywhere, I want to say that the waste accusation got me angry, and I want to just get rid of it immediately, because when you use the word waste, you have an assumption of what is worthy, what uses are worthy, and there's an assumption built in that those clicks that we were generating, or those queries that were generated by Track Me Not, were wasteful of bandwidth or wasteful of server time, whereas me searching Justin Bieber, you know, that was acceptable use. Or me looking at kittens endlessly, you know, that is a use. So I decided I don't even think there's much to argue here, because what we were trying to do is to protect privacy, and that seemed like a good thing. And so I didn't even want to factor this waste question into consideration. Now, if you follow some kind of systematic ethical reasoning, roughly utilitarian reasoning, in order to make an argument that some activity is just, or that it's right, or defensible, the first thing you have to say, first of all, obfuscation is not in itself good. And maybe we would say it's not in itself bad. But what you want to do initially is to make sure that the purposes of obfuscation are just. And so we looked at many of the cases that we'd been studying and decided that, for example, if AdNauseam is an attempt to elude surveillance and profiling, that was a just end. Or if Track Me Not is trying to achieve intellectual freedom so that people can inquire, go after information freely without being concerned that they're under surveillance, promote intellectual freedom, that's a just end. In the case of hardware obfuscation, which I didn't talk about, which is a technique that many chip makers use in order to protect intellectual property, they create some sort of fake circuits to protect this intellectual property. That seemed like a just end. But robbing a bank, obviously, or fooling consumers, other uses, we had to say, okay, that's just no longer something that we're going to justify. And so, having established that Track Me Not and AdNauseam, in our view, were the ends were just, there's still another question that one needs to ask, which is, and we all know this phrase, do the ends justify the means? And one way of looking at it is to say, are there other ways of doing this that are less harmful? Are there gentler means? And we looked at some of the predominant possibilities. Oh, people would say, you could just opt out. And I don't think we can opt out. We're way too far down. Law and regulation have not helped us much. Corporate best practice takes us to a distance, but the underlying model itself is problematic. And technology wasn't helping us with those particular cases that we were looking at. And so now back to this just general idea of cause harm. When you think about causing harm or when your actions are diminishing the interest, somebody else's interest, a question you want to ask is, do you owe it to that party not to cause the harm? And this particular phrase, what we owe others, what do we owe others, comes from the philosopher and ethicist, a great philosopher and ethicist, Tim Scanlon, which is that it's not sufficient to say you're causing harm or you're interfering with the interests, but that you owe the person not to do that. And that's an ethical question. So when you look at Fred Cohen, and it was really interesting that in Fred Cohen's, the same article, he was concerned about the fact that decoys are, in a way, lying to the malicious attacker. But I think we would all agree that lying to a malicious attacker is you don't owe the truth to the malicious attacker if you can provide a decoy. Now, a very strict Kantian might disagree with you, and there is, that the case where the murderer comes to a person and says, I want to kill Shafi. Where did she go? And Kant argued, you still are obligated to tell the truth. And I think that centuries of ethicists have tried to make sense of that particular recommendation, but I just thought I would let you know that. Okay, so AdNauseam, coming back to AdNauseam, it caused a stir at the time, and it was more controversial. And 3 years after we released it, it was banned. So this is February 2017. But I don't know if you can read it, but the reason given is that we have a single-purpose policy, and we consider your extension's functionality that blocks malware to be a distinct purpose from the function which hides and clicks ads. To have your item reinstated, we suggest restricting the extension to a single functionality. So we were puzzled by this because we didn't think that blocking malware should be considered as kind of an additional thing, that we should actually remove that functionality and then our software would be accepted. But nevertheless, and this actually you can see is not the very first communication, and we kept on trying to adjust the system, adjust it back and forth, no such luck. So we had some good publicity out of that, and yet, I was troubled, and I was troubled by what we were doing with AdNauseam because I think people raised some important questions. So I decided to look at, do a big search on what other extensions and apps had been banned from the Chrome store, well, the Chrome store and also the Play store. And here was one, the Windows Chrome extensions, and then Microsoft retaliated. And disconnect was another one that was banned, which blocks non-consensual third-party data collectors that monitor users when they surf. These two were also banned. These were independent app stores. Aptroid is a Portuguese independent app store, and this was banned from the Play Store. Gab is a social network that, as you see, is used by the alt-right. So it was banned. Stylish was essentially spyware that people downloaded thinking it was one thing, but actually it did very bad things on your browser. And here Gizmodo had talked about it. Fake ID apps were banned. And then finally, you have these malicious cryptocurrency mining extension and that in the background are using your system to mine cryptocurrency. So where did we fall in all of this? Like, I don't know if we were in such good company. So, some of the companies seemed okay to us. And in thinking about it, there seemed to be three groups. One was a group of apps and extensions that we could just say do bad things. The other one are apps and extensions that are conduits or mediators of bad things. And the third one were simply apps and extensions that conflict with Google's interests. And I want to say, this happened to be with Google, but I want to generalize and talk about platforms generally, because I don't think this is a Google-only question. And when I went back to the apps and extensions, this is how I classified them. The first are, societal ethical standards. You had community standards, and then you have interests. So we're back to the Tim Scanlon question of what do we owe? And I wanted to look at the second one and say, okay, Google, Facebook, and so on, they take the high ground and they're getting rid of Gab. But what have we learned in the past few years? That as mediators of bad things, this ad model has allowed the fake news that has threatened our democracies, target people searching racist phrases. Of course, Facebook, similar concerns. This model also provides honeypots for folks who want data. And then finally, this too, which was recently reported in the news. So let's come back to this and say, where do we stand? And finally, after some back and forth, we got an answer from Michael Felgust, who is with Google. And now the story was different. And even though we had solved some of the other problems, we're still not compliant, and we're not going to be reinstated. And what it says here is that sending automated clicks in such a way that they may result in financial harm to third-party systems such as advertising networks. And so I wondered about this, because you don't want your product to have, be a sec, to harm innocent bystanders. That was the phrase that I wanted to think of. So I did a little bit of research, and this is, I don't know what you can see here, but this is the proportion of ad networks that are present on the web. And to say that we're harming third parties, I think, is a little bit disingenuous. So I want to say, I mean, it's you know, maybe with setting humility aside, that AdNauseam belongs in this third category. So we have apps and extensions that compete with the platform's interests, and that's what they are. Now that in itself, and you know, blah, blah, here are a couple of things. But how do we resolve these conflicts in society? The story is not over, by the way. Yes?
What's an third party? Is it, for example, the person who is buying the ad that might have to get charged for your click instead of Google?
Has been an argument, like the Pale Moon argument, but it wasn't the argument. It was third-party systems such as advertising networks. So I was only speaking to that. And it is the case that AdNauseam does cause people who have tracking ads on their websites to pay money even though the ad being clicked is clicked by AdNauseam.
But interestingly, to pay money with a commission to Google, so eventually it might just be the interest of Google.
It's whoever the ad network is, but it does harm the party who places the ad. And this is probably the most troubling thing about AdNauseam. But what we have is we have a whitelisting capacity, and we give users the choice, and we actually advise as a default that we don't click the whitelisted ads, which are non-tracking ads. So, all right, so this is where we put ourselves. And where this puts us is in a complex situation. Think about Microsoft versus Google in that situation. Think about AdNauseam trying to struggle in one way, and Google is providing a service, and what we're doing conflicts with the business model. And I think there's no end to the story in the sense that, well, the end of the story is if you have Chrome on a Windows machine, there's a way to install AdNauseam on your computer. If you have a Mac, then you use Chrome, you're out of luck, you cannot. And that's why we don't have statistics for Chrome use, although in the first 3 years, the Chrome use was way more than the Firefox use. So what we have is an ongoing debate in society where we who are trying to defend privacy are saying the laws are not strong enough. We need to have a way to defend ourselves. We need some way, because what kept on happening with the do not track standard was that industry would just at some point get up and walk out the room. If you don't have a bargaining chip on the other side, you've got no way to achieve the goal you need. On the other hand, you do need to stake your claim on the moral high ground, and I think that many of the platforms are trying to show that what they're doing is also on this moral high ground, and that their interests are actually compatible with social interests. And I say the court of law is no help, because we don't yet have good laws, privacy laws. I don't know how I'm doing on time, but I could be going on. I've got about 5 minutes left, right? Yeah. What? Go for it. Oh, yes, I know, but Tali wanted to.
Just a quick question. So from a point of view of my privacy, what's the difference between clicking on all the ads and not clicking on a single one of them? Like,
yes.
Why don't you just block all the clicks?
Okay.
Nothing is being clicked, so there will be no tracking, and same amount of information
Okay.
for advertisers.
Hold the thought. I want to answer that, but let me try and just get through a little bit of this part, which is going to be much shorter.
Yeah, we'll have some time for questions.
Maybe just very briefly, just before we get to the does it work, I just want to sort of hint that it feels to me that the does it work is an essential part of the ethical question Because to me, the biggest ethical concern is whether you give people a false sense of security. So I just wanted to.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay, good. Does it work? And you'll see that. And does it work as well as it could? And the answer is, I don't know. No, the answer is, it depends. So let me take you back to Track Me Not for a moment, because this is the situation that we're in with Track Me Not. Here we were, I'm saying, oh my God, I don't want search engines to monitor me. I don't want them to store. I don't want them to profile. I don't want to feel self-conscious when I look up, cure for herpes. I don't want to feel that this is going into some record that I'll have to account for. That's not what a free society does. So what do? I go to my government and I say, do something about this, protect me. Nothing. I go to the search engine company. Who do I write to? And it's like, we have actually had some meetings over the years, and there has been some progress. Like after X number of years, we're going to remove a number, the last such and such numbers of the IP address, so, there won't be so much linking. Basically, no help. So there's only one way to get in. Can you see? I don't know. This is a door. So there's one way you can get the search engine to respond to you. And what's that? You submit a search. Who said that? Good. You submit a search. So that's like the vector. That's the point of entry. And that was how we decided that's how we're going to do it. With Track Me Not, that's our point of entry. And Gary Marks, who was a very early theorist, he's a sociologist of social implications of digital technology, has a book and also an article in this book. It's Attack in the Shoe, Neutralizing and Resisting the New Surveillance. He had this beautiful observation that one way that people, the weaker party in a certain relationship, can defend themselves is you find a blind spot that's inherent in a large-scale system. And this felt to us like a beautiful account of what we were doing with obfuscation. And Fred Cohen observes, a little bit plaintively, that you can never be done, whatever you're doing can't be done definitively without tremendous intelligence capability. So when you ask, does it work? Or, and I wanted you to see this particular use of obfuscation, which was used during the Macron, after the whole concern about Russian hackers, during the elections in France, Macron's team had used these kinds of decoys to obfuscate attacks. So when we come back now to this question of does it work, and I call friendly fire, Catarina, you, because I've had a lot of arguments, I won't mention with whom, about why data obfuscation is just arbitrary and it's haphazard, and can you verify the impact? And the answer is we don't have the intelligence. It didn't come out right, but we don't have insight into what's going on the other side, because these are wholly opaque, untransparent systems. And so we've done some testing, we've solved some of the side channel problems, but we don't know, can they find and throw out the fake queries? If so, maybe the cost is too great. We're interested in some statistical success. Can they identify people using Track Me Not? I think they could if they looked at the particular terms, but can they do it on scale? We don't know. I think not. And does it matter? And now with machine learning, maybe the fake queries are even irrelevant. So With AdNauseam, we go through the whole argument. Yeah, they can tell you're using AdNauseam, so what do we do? We just throw your data out. Well, that's success. So what we decide about it, and now we're getting, this is now very close to the end, is that when you talk about success with obfuscation, you really need to talk about what the aims are. It's never this global theoretic success that you might want with other theoretical approaches. Sometimes you just want to buy a little bit of time. So if you're flying over and you release the chaff, you know that at some point the chaff's disappearing and there's only a phosphodot. But you've had enough time to drop the bomb and fly away. Sometimes it's just to provide cover or prevent individual exposure or to interfere with profiling, not to prevent identification, but to interfere with the profile they have of you. They may know it's you, but they may make mistakes about what you are. And sometimes it's just to express protest. There are certain requirements that people may have of their systems. Do we want it to be stealth, or do we not care whether they know that we're obfuscating? Is it short-term or long-term, selective or general? Do we want to obfuscate to the whole world or just to targeted individuals? Who's the adversary? Is it just my nosy neighbor? Or is it the NSA? Is it a powerful person? Is it rich? How determined are they? How much are they willing to throw at the problem? These are all factors that are going to determine whether your system works. So I would love to see a science of data obfuscation, but it can't be too general because there are too many dimensions. We need to take the aims, we need to know what the requirements are, and maybe acquire some systematic knowledge. Recently, very recently, a couple of weeks ago, Jonathan Zittrain had said that, and more vital today than at its launch years ago, and Shoshana Zuboff continues to be concerned about what she, especially in her recent book, Surveillance Capitalists, are the envy of every state security agency. I think data obfuscation has a powerful potential. It could be scary, needs to pass the test of ethics, but it also needs to be safeguarded. And this is what we need to safeguard ethical data obfuscation. And I'm going to end, and I'm going to just leave this slide here because I've now spoken for long enough, and happy to take questions.
Now we're going to open the floor for questions. And you decide who you want to
We have microphones that we'll pass around. Right here.
Should I wait for?
Yeah, you can tell
also
us.
someone over here who's been trying to ask.
Oh, really? I didn't.
Right here.
So I'm wondering what you think about encrypted messaging apps like WhatsApp or Signal in terms of, for example, with WhatsApp. WhatsApp is owned by Facebook. They claim that their messages are end-to-end encrypted so that WhatsApp and Facebook can't read them. But we don't necessarily trust what Facebook tells us. And so do you have any ideas for potentially obfuscating messages, like sending fake messages over there?
That's a great question in that, and I was running out of time and I wasn't able to kind of dwell on this question of a threat model, because many of the colleagues in the privacy program are working on something called differential privacy. And that requires, in many instances, a collaboration. So with WhatsApp, and I don't know, you're getting a service that's saying that it's end-to-end encrypted and it's even encrypted from the provider of that service. If you feel comfortable that that provider can verify this fact with you, then this is great. But the cases that I was talking about with obfuscation were cases where you have an adversarial relationship with that provider. So I can't answer your question about Facebook and the details of it because I don't have enough knowledge of that relationship. But what I can say is that different solutions in the privacy space, we really need to bring to the fore what the threat model is. What is the nature of the adversarial model? Because in some cases, certain solutions will work. But in other cases, you might need to use obfuscation, which arguably is a somewhat weaker solution, a privacy solution. And when I say weaker, I mean more vulnerable and maybe more messy. Yeah. Thank you.
So I want to come back to the question of whether it works. I'll make an educated guess that it doesn't. Why is that? Because click fraud is a giant problem on the internet. It's one of the ways of monetizing bot networks. So any advertising systems worth their salt deploy very sophisticated technologies to filter out fraudulent clicks. So my assumption is that the clicks generated by AdNauseam will be filtered out immediately without reaching the backends of the advertising systems. So Catarina asked whether AdNauseam gives people like a false sense of security. I would rephrase it, whether it gives them a false sense of protest. They protest, but no one hears. Mm-hmm. Does it concern you?
Why did we get banned?
Looks like fraudulent clicks.
Yeah, well, it does impose a cost on unsophisticated advertisers. So any real system won't notice that because like the number of click frauds of fraudulent clicks is like I believe it's like it was estimated more than 10%. It's giant. So I don't think AdNauseam imposed a significant cost on.
I'm open to show me. You know, what I'm saying is I am happy to have this conversation. Show me that it works, show me that it doesn't work, but show me how this system works so that I can verify the right method to use to protect myself against it. And I think that I have a lot of reason to believe that you have better knowledge in this case than I do. But that's part of the conversation that we want to have. Yeah, so you're asking, like, do I feel bad that users? No, because I think that what people can do is they can not click on ads if they don't want that particular vector of information to be going to the ad networks, or they could protest, and I like the fact that they're protesting.
Helen?
Yes.
Okay, it's not, I guess it's not so much a question, it's maybe an observation. I'm trying to figure out why we would have to protect the rights and the goals of a Google or of an unsuspecting, poorly sort of formed third party that is very unsophisticated versus like our personal me and what I want. So I do understand that probably when I sign up for my Google, I go into Google, somewhere it says, if you agree to use our service, then we agree to collect. And then that's what you're paying by giving us. So, but what we really don't want you to do is just do all this fraudulent clicking around, because that'll really mess up our goals, right? But if my goal is just to basically look for things. And instead I'm getting bombarded with ads. Like, I just want to know, like, what are my rights as a user in that
Yeah.
space? And is it okay, because we live in a capitalist world, really,
Right.
is it okay that on the capital earning, the sort of rent-taking side, has
Yeah.
more rights than me, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
we're still looking for ways to protect we individuals who are using service. And does society say, yeah, but see, they have more money and they're providing you the service, so they have more rights than you? Is that where the balance is?
The current situation is somewhat akin to what you're saying. Not about the money part or anything, but the current system that we have is that organizations or service providers have a policy. I don't even want to grant it the term privacy policy. They have a policy that explains to you, and nobody reads it, and we don't understand it, and like so many people have already said that. And then if you use the service, then you've agreed to those terms. So that's why I say I don't want to get involved in the legality question, because it's legal. That's the system. The EU has tried to do something about it, but I'm not sure where that is going to lead us. So these efforts, there was a period of time where privacy advocates tried to expand what users could do by creating something called a do not track standard, where you could flip a switch on your browser that, as you went from place to place, said, I don't want to be tracked. And there are all these third-party trackers that come on board when you visit various websites. And that, this could have been a standard that everybody adopted and respected. But there were years of discussion, and every time it got to some point that the advertisers and the ad networks didn't like, they walked out of the room, and this happened a few times. So the answer is we haven't made progress. What we're trying to say is that we need to give some, when you're at a bargaining table, you need some chips. And if you don't have chips, you can't do anything. I mean, I respect the challenge that these three people are making. So help me make better obfuscation programs, ones that work better, No, but but there's someone a couple of hands at the back, and there's someone over here.
I just wanted to make two comments. The DuckDuckGo search engine says they don't keep your logs.
Yeah.
And also, EFF has Privacy Badger, which you can stop the tracking cookies if you want, but it will break some websites.
Good. No, so and
I just want to mention that those are available if people are interested. I personally use DuckDuckGo, and I get better results than from Google.
That's surprising. Yeah.
I find that they're the results are actually more on target to what I'm looking for.
I also use DuckDuckGo, but I also use TrackMeNot. Okay. Yeah.
It was just you didn't mention them, and I thought to mention.
No, thank you. And there are other approaches, like Tor is another approach that people can use that are even more comprehensive.
Hi, so I've noticed that in Berkeley a few more shops within a year have stopped accepting cash. Can you see sort of a data obfuscation game playing out in that area?
So what are the problems for which obfuscation is the solution? And there's certain interactions that I don't think obfuscation is the solution to. When you go to your physician, don't obfuscate. But society has been very clever. So in those cases where you're supposed to not obfuscate, we try and have a backstop where we impose some confidentiality requirements. And in the financial arena in particular, because that's the way I view it, because of this kind of need to be very precise and to keep records, we do happen to have regulation. Now, what you're saying, there's massive change in the financial arena, And the way the regulation works in the United States, I'm like getting a little carried away because this is like another thing, which is the way the regulation works in the United States for these sectoral privacy rules is that you identify who the service provider is. Like you might say, these are financial actors. And it's according to the definition of those financial actors that they are subject to those privacy regulations. There's been an entry of all sorts of different actors into the health space, into the education space, into the financial space, and many of them are not covered by those sectoral regulations. So we're in trouble. That's all I can say, because I don't think obfuscation. I can't think of obfuscation as a solution to that.
What do you think about, like, we see these products as free a lot of the time, like
Yeah.
Google, but in reality, you know, and I think this is a follow-up to one of the prior questions, kind of,
Yeah.
but, you know, they have to charge something. You know, they're a company.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's not just legally, but morally, you know, you're giving up your privacy and your rights to, you know, keep that data private in order to use their services for free. You know? And it seems a little bit immoral to kind of deny that.
How about this? You walk into a store and you pick up a shirt and you hand your credit card and the company says, let's not talk price. When you get home, you'll see how much I charged you. Or maybe you'll never know how much I charged you. So when we're talking, the problem with this particular, and you're right, this is really a big systemic problem, is that we don't know the value of it, and we just don't have insight into it. And so there are people now who are suggesting different kinds of models, but I don't think there's an obligation to hand a blank check.
Sorry, do you mind if I ask kind of an unrelated follow-up to that?
Sure.
Just in general, there's a lot of companies and sectors that kind of collect data, you know, not just private companies, but governments too, from cameras, you know, all throughout cities.
Yeah.
And I think most recently I heard about, like, gas stations, right? There's such a massive network of gas station cameras that are now being connected to each other to analyze people as they come and leave in their trends. Where do you, like, how do you draw the line between all these different sectors of, like, what you should and should not do? You know, where do you say, no, that's too far?
Yeah. Great question. And it really takes us into the big space of privacy and what the extent of the right is and what it means and so on. And I don't think I have enough time to answer that question. It's a great question, and you should keep asking it, and you should try and do something about it, because at the moment, the way we regulate society, we don't have the right, the people who are in charge of regulating these activities don't really seem to understand the ramifications. And so by the time we do catch up, we're going to be in trouble. So people should remain active and engaged.
Yeah, I just wanted to suggest a way to test if it works. You could click selectively on some ads, for example, the thriller ads, and then see if you have a different set of ads being suggested to you if you click them through the AdNauseam network.
You're saying ways to test
the efficiency.
whether it works.
So you just click selectively and see if it changes the type of ads that you get.
Do you want to? We'd love you to help us with. Do you want to give it? And then this person over here at the back. Oh, and sorry.
Yeah, just what AdNauseam is a wild success, even as a provocation on getting Google support to have to respond, even if it does absolutely nothing to the ad networks or for users. My question is, I thought when energy was mentioned on the ethical slide, I think we're going to talk about the additional pollution required by running it on your computer versus an ad blocker. And I wonder if you have any idea what the energy consumption is relative to an ad blocker.
Wow. Yeah, no. And in fact, that question has been raised. I don't know. It's so hard to know what the comparison point would be when you think about different people's levels of usage. Yeah.
It looks like it's based on an ad blocker.
Yeah, yeah. Right. And what if it did? What if it did? It was incrementally more. The point about the waste is whether you deem a certain use to be a use or a waste. So when there's a drought, people in Northern California really grumble because people in Southern California are busy watering their lawns with the water. And the North thinks, oh, that's a waste of water. You know, they deem it a waste of water, but maybe having a shower is not a waste. You know, so it's part of the judgment. If I'm saying I'm defending my privacy, then I don't see it as a waste. I see it as a good use. But I appreciate your question. I mean, I'm not sure if it...
I had two questions, concerns actually. One was just raised about the energy usage, especially if these add-ons become widespread and then everybody is running one and it becomes sort of like a large scale.
Yeah, let's take Track Me Not. Everybody's using it.
For example, right?
Yeah, dream come true.
Then what are the what are the implications of that energy-wise? And it could be substantial on that scale. But my second concern was actually in the other scenario where only a few people are using something like that. So there have been multiple uses of search query information by law enforcement. In particular, that was used as evidence where people would be searching for something sinister online, and that would add to, the additional evidence collected, and then some people were convicted of crimes based on their searches. Now, in the do not track scenario, you are randomly sampling and replicating those searches. So I wonder how do not track handles this situation where somebody could be unfairly accused of potentially committing a crime based on, or whatever, maybe it's not a crime, but some kind of suspicion may arise based on those randomly generated searches that system generated.
Yeah, yeah. And this came, by the way, in terms of like, I said of my dream come true, but it seems to me that if a lot of people are using some of these, I think the services and the companies would be savvy to that. And they would see that so many people are interested in something. Actually, so what we've said in our various publications about AdNauseam, about Track Me Not, is we don't think of obfuscation as the end solution. The end solution is good regulation in society that takes, so you remember I said like there are these conflicting interests and what do we do to resolve them? We need regulators who are going to look at that, and it gets to your question, Amy, also, and come up with good regulation. Obfuscation, for the most part, especially ours, is just an interim solution. And the signal that we're getting, the more people use it, and we're way tiny. I completely accept that. But if more people are, then it's sending a signal about popular resistance. But your other point is a very important point, and it's the difference between a free society and a not free society. So the most important thing about a free society is that we resist these dragnet kinds of searches. If someone is accused of and we also think we value intellectual freedom as part of the First Amendment. And when we do a dragnet, we may, we just don't accept dragnet searches. If you're under suspicion for some other reason, and then we decide we're going to search your search queries, then perhaps that provides some additional evidence. But if we become that society where we're going to do a general search on what people are searching, then we're no longer a free society. So that doesn't bother me so much, though I accept that there could be that consequence.
Piggybacking on what one of the people was asking up there before, first I just wanted to say I feel very strongly about privacy issues online, so I really appreciate what you're focused on and the whole idea of this basically being a foot in the door. It's not an answer, but it's a way to stick the foot in the door and say, hey, let's try and crack this door open so we have a bargaining chip so that they're actually listening in some way. One of the things that's tricky in terms of piggybacking the comment earlier about the financial piece is unlike the medical environment with HIPAA, where you do have the privacy, we are, or health insurance providers are actually paying the doctors. In this situation, the search engines, it's totally run by ads. So it almost seems like there needs to be some kind of option where if you or I want this service, we get to pay for it. Just like when I go on iTunes, because I don't feel like watching ads when I want to see one particular 30-minute program. And if I want to watch it for free, okay, I'll suck it up and I'll watch the different ads. That's a choice I get to make. In a search choice, I don't get that. In DuckDuckGo, I've not had that positive experience.
Yeah. Well, so I'm so pleased you asked that question, because none of what I have done is contrary to ads. And in fact, I use AdNauseam with show me the ads switched on, just not the tracking. And there was a time, and it wasn't even that long ago, where online services offered contextual ads, which is, and they weren't even random. They were ads that were related to, if you went to a clothing, whatever store you went to, or whatever website, it would be related to kind of generally understood. And it's only, as far as I'm understanding, to get a delta increase in revenues, that we have an entire surveillance mechanism on the web in order to service that little extra bit. So if advertising is going to support a website, I don't mind. Some people are annoyed by advertising, they use ad blockers. But I would accept that as an exchange. The part that all of this resists is the surveillance. I don't know how we're doing on time. You should tell me when I should stop. Okay. Oh. Okay. One last question.
Last question. What about mobile? A lot of the worst privacy invasions are actually on these devices.
Yeah.
And the younger generation isn't using laptops anymore. They live on mobile.
Yeah. Right. Well, so, and we've had these conversations a lot. One of the troubles with mobile, I think it's a trouble, the companies don't think it's a trouble, is that the systems are much more closed. And so whereas there's a lot that we can see in the web because it has these open protocols, the mobile operating systems are much more buttoned down. This was something Jonathan Zittrain wrote about many years ago. Maybe not enough people paid attention to him, but I think that reality is there. Now, you can generate apps, and we're talking about transitioning some of these as apps onto the mobile environment, but I'm not sure how they'll translate. But it's a great point.
Thank you very much, Helen.